So with this over-policing issue, we are, the numbers, I don't know if anybody repeated it, but throughout the state, it's 690 school arrests. In Baltimore City, it's 620. That's about 90% of the state. So there's an issue here. And so we're just saying if there are trends associated with that number, what are the policing issues? We just want to make sure that kids are safe and that we're studying the arrest. One thing that I didn't mention that I'd just like to add is that we would love data collection, more data collection and clear policy guidelines. I mentioned the guidelines, but also I'll look at
If you'd like to write that into us, we'll be happy.
I will.
Thanks.
And so I do actually have copies.
Thank you. Okay, Race Akbar. Sorry if I missed it.
A lot of interest in this topic, and y'all trying to cover it up. Amazing. Trying to cover it up.
Good evening, members of the Board of Commissioners. My name is Race Akbar. I'm the Juvenile Justice Policy Director for Advocates for Children and Youth, or ACY. ACY is a multi-issue youth advocacy organization based in Baltimore City. And I'm here to urge an opposition to HB 101 and its companion Senate bill for two primary reasons. Both of them have to do with the research that has been done, the academic scholarly research that's been done on the presence of armed police in schools. First of all, I'd like to associate myself with all the comments that were made by the other panel witnesses in opposition to these bills. There's a lot of discussion of the school-to-prison pipeline. The presence of a policing environment in schools contributes to a pattern of practice of over-disciplining students, particularly students of color, African-American boys in particular, and over-reliance on a policing response to ordinary childhood misbehavior, and that sort of, this pattern which leads students almost in mechanical fashion from the schools to the juvenile justice system and sometimes to further incarceration. The research that I would primarily draw, there's a wealth of research out there, but one study in particular that I would draw your attention to is done by the Congressional Research Service. I understand that members of the Board of Commissioners have a copy of this. It was emailed to you by one of my colleagues. It's a good summary of a whole set of research that's been done on this. So in opposition, in contrast to the research that was done on school-to-prison pipeline, there's a relative paucity of research on what the effect of armed police have on actual safety in schools. There are two situations which we can discuss. One is the mass shooter scenario, such as Newtown or Columbine High School. There's not much research on this question, hardly any. Columbine High School in Colorado had an armed school resource officer that did not prevent the mass shooting there. What studies that have been done on the presence of police against mass shooters is inconclusive at best, and like I said, there's just not that much out there. And as far as studies that address the effectiveness of armed police in general school safety, a lot of it is inconclusive, and even those studies that indicate that there is less crime and violence primarily rely on subjective perceptions of safety rather than objective measures of actual safety. So given what the research tells us on the school-to-prison pipeline set against what the research doesn't tell us on school safety, it does not seem warranted for this bill to pass, to be supported, which would further entrench and further normalize a policing environment in Baltimore City schools, which has a demonstrable negative effect on educational outcomes for our students. Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph Galen. Are you Ms. Sacco?
Yes.
And you are?
Gillian Price. I think I may be on the next sheet.
Hello, my name is Joseph Galen, and the other two students with me represent City Block, as well as students who are actually going to be affected by the policies that are coming up, and we think that it's really important for student voice to be heard in these issues and how we actually see and perceive increased guns in schools. So first we want to make it very clear that we think that And we think it's extremely important to trust our police officers, and we do. And we come here with the utmost respect for and the working conditions and the dedication that police officers come and bring to the table every day. That being said, we've all seen the video of the startling beating at the middle school in Baltimore City. And as a student, that kind of instills fear upon you, especially when you're talking about increasing the amount of guns that are going to be put into our schools. I think if you look at the statistics, you can clearly see that arrest rates increase, punitive measures increase when there are more guns placed in schools, and that's especially for youth of color, which, as we all know, is largely the case in Baltimore City. And I think it's about the culture we teach towards our students. And as a student who would be faced with this every day, it's a question as to whether or not we talk about punishing students or whether we talk about nourishing and actually having an education. And I think, coming to this board decision, making a decision without actually hearing from students would not only be naive, but to say that you're trying to create a reformed student body, you're trying to create a reformed form of engagement without having a voice and talking to students throughout what it means to increase militarization of police and the police presence in schools would be blatantly incorrect. And again, I think that brings us to issues of what it actually means to save lives. And certainly it's very important to look at potential shootings that can happen, but if you look at the data, as he was stating earlier, at major at major shootings, you'll see that a lot of the data don't point to the fact that police with more guns have been able to stop the issues. And so then I think the issue becomes, what does it mean when a student comes to school every day, walks through a metal detector, sees police with guns standing in front of them, and are basically feeling like it's more of a jail than it is a place to learn. And I think it's about how we treat our students to have respect and how to empower them to learn for education, not to discipline and control them. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carolyn. I guess I agree with a lot of what Joseph just said. But I'd just like to add that I think that a lot of the evidence in which parents were pointing out earlier is really true, that guns really only promote the violence in which they are trying to prevent. And it's just from my own personal perspective and from the perspective of a student, if you see a person like walking through the hallways with a gun, I think you're more likely to carry a gun in the future, knowing that like you live and you learn in this militaristic environment. And that if you imagine that you're a student again, like trying to learn in a safe environment, and then imagine that you have to walk through the halls with people who are carrying guns that are supposed to protect you, but are also authorized to use those guns on you, is problematic. And I think that even if we authorize guns in these schools, there needs to be some kind of restriction. The bill doesn't mention any kind of restriction about what kind of use these officers would have on students, or even on potential threats outside of the school, which is something that was really important, and the bill didn't mention any of that. And I think that there was no student or parent input before this meeting about like how they would be affected by the guns. By guns in the schools. And like, we all have immense respect for the school police and immense respect for what they do and what and the ways that they save lives every day. But I think that no evidence in any way justifies like the use of the use of guns in schools. And even, I guess he gave the example of like Newtown earlier, and how like Baltimore City schools could be the next Newtown or be the next mass shooting. But I think Joseph also mentioned the ways that like during mass shootings, Columbine in 1999 had several armed guards, and they were not able to prevent any of the events that happened that day. So I think that it's about the, regardless of, we can't just use what ifs. We also have to talk about like the ways that the environment is going to affect the students now, if the bill is implemented now.
I just want you to know we're gonna give 3 minutes to each one of them, so.
Thank you. Because of recent discussions that we have had surrounding police brutality and the fact that we, the very same students who protested the school to prison pipeline last month on January 9th, are sitting here demanding the same exact things, is troubling and reflective of the school system that has failed to answer the needs of the students, the needs of families, and the needs to the communities it was set up to serve. We are all familiar with the rally cries that have been heard around the country that have left messages against violence and for a harmonious society resounding even on our very own streets. Chants like "hands up, don't shoot," I can't breathe, and even I can't breathe in the city that reads are chants that we have heard in this building and throughout the streets of Baltimore, and even onto the highway as students from this school system have protested what has been going on in our communities. From which we have demanded things like representation, transparency, and even support, from which we have still yet to receive a statement of support from student organizers who fight against this very thing from our very own CEO. To that same point, we are equally as familiar with the role that our schools should be playing in our communities. We are more than aware of the fact that for many of our students, school serves as a safe haven from their violence-ridden communities. School serves as an escape from the fatal shootings of 2013, which killed 23 children, or the 89 shootings from the year before that took the lives of Baltimore City students, our students, my peers, potential college grads, potential policymakers, potential trailblazers for our futures. We are the city of potential. We, the students, are the potential of our city. Do not let the mishandling of a gun, a police officer mistaking what a student pulls out of their pocket to be a weapon, or a premature, unnecessary act of violence be the reason why potential is killed.
Thank you very much.
For those of you that are keeping time, it says 5:51, and this was intended to end at 6 o'clock, but we're going to continue and hear from everybody, make sure that we get a full picture of what folks are thinking. Next, I'd like to call up Craig Rivers, the principal of Maryville.